customer-centric companies? Do you have processes which are aligned with the customer? My second question I would like you to think is, does being customer-centric, does it offer a distinctive advantage? Is it a competitive advantage? So the panel we had today in this session, we are going to discuss how SMAC could be deployed to develop new value propositions and new business models. So we are pushing the envelope a little high because we are going to, talk a lot of concepts, okay, and see how practically these concepts can be deployed. So the challenge here is everybody could be customer-centric. Customer centricity is nothing new anymore. What is important is how do you develop distributable value proposition, and how SMAC is going to help you in that process. So we have two speeches. First speech is from Peter, who is next to my immediate left. Peter Almeida from Enable CEO. We have Christian from Oracle Singapore. And we have Jonathan Alas. Now, I would like to tell you that during the last 1 hour, there was a huge change in the Sri Lankan banking industry. So HNB is the #1 private bank asset now. In the previous session, it was some other bank. It was always. Okay, it was always. And we have Gainidi Alvis, ex-Unilever supply chain customer development director, is a management consultant. And Irfan, he leads, innovation process at Bodyline. Sorry, before that we have Malinga. And today's session is second session is chaired by Rohan. Rohan, so it's 10:33. So you can go up to 11:48. 11:48. Good. Okay. Thank you so much. Over to you, Rohan. Please welcome our panel.
Can you all hear me? Mics are working. Good morning. Thank you, Lakshman. You must have seen a very fascinating, very corporate, very great panel discussion in the morning. I can assure you our session is not going to be anything like that. So I think one of the things I wanted to speak about before I meet the speaker at for the opening keynote is that how many of you had like your alarm set by the mobile phone today in the morning? How many? Hands up. Up. Let's not be Sri Lankan for once. Fantastic. So I think for me, it's not different. Set the alarm at a certain time. And then what happened was my phone told me that, Rohan, you have this LBR LBO session at 10:30 in the morning. Sri Lanka Colombo traffic is heavier than usual today. So leave home maybe 10 minutes early. Oh, by the way, you will meet one of your ex-girlfriends. You dated her 10 years back. And she's going to tell you that she's getting married. Act surprised and wish her all the best. So my phone, how many of you think that your phone can't tell you that right now? Fantastic. We have an extremely forward-thinking audience. So the point I'm going to make is before we talk about being enterprise, before social, before analytics, before mobile, before cloud, all of us ourselves. And right now, the technology is available to tie all these different pieces together. And the world has moved from demographic targeting, psychographic targeting, to a phase where you actually think about a customer as a person and an individual person. There have been amazing development that have happened in the Sri Lankan over the last, I think, 2-3 years. And we are going to talk a little bit about that. So to open our second session, I'd like to invite Peter Almeida. If you don't know Peter Almeida, you haven't lived in Sri Lanka for the last X number of years. So I don't think I'm anyway qualified to introduce you, Peter, but it's open to you and 15 minutes for you. And I will give you a bit of a...
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you, Rohan, for your left-handed compliment. And ably supported by Lakshman, alluding 70 years to my life. Anyway, I think the first session pretty much covered a lot of the basics, and I think they did a very good job of dealing with what this whole topic was all about. I would avoid SMAC because I'm not a big fan of acronyms. Sorry, Lakshman. Now you could have called it scam, and then it would have all been really screwed. So I'll say digital. It's all about digital transformation, and I want to focus on just three things: the context in which we are talking, which is value creation, and the only way to create value is through innovation. And I'll also talk a little bit about what is this distinctive, this notion of distinctive. Is there such a thing? In fact, Lakshman, I would straight away try to be a little controversial and say, is there anything that is non-replicable today? So I think the framing of the topic, and I think you must have done it very deliberately to be provocative, is that my contention is that nothing is non-replicable, and we'll talk about that in a minute. So that's a fallacy in itself. Quickly, because originally when Lakshman invited me to speak, I think I was supposed to speak for about 30 minutes. But he was very fortunate to have Chris from Oracle jump in and say he would like to speak a few words. So we are sharing our time, so I have 15 minutes. I'll try to stay to my time. Help me, Rohan, with this. Okay, so the context, I think, in which companies are operating today is very simple. We are all in the business. There's only one thing we strive to do in business. That's what I believe, and that's what lots of people believe. And that is nothing but create value. That's it. That's the only purpose for any company's existence. Create value. You can paraphrase it slightly and say, create, deliver, and capture value. That's fine. Now, this in itself is a huge challenge, but it gets a little complex when you understand that the market, there's nothing new about this. Companies in the old days also tried to capture value. But today, the market has changed tremendously. And the market change is being driven by disruptive technologies that we speak about today: social media, analytics, and cloud. And these are coming together in a very unique way to really completely change the way people, our customers today, are connecting, communicating, collaborating, and taking collective action. So that's the market. So the market has fully adopted digital, and they are well informed. They have groups. This raises the whole question of brands, which is a topic later in the afternoon. With the age of perfect information, my own view is that brands themselves might disappear. Maybe not, but they'll have to completely re-look at the way they function. So markets are very dynamic because the customers have adopted this technology very, very quickly. So they are well ahead of us in the game. That's one. Secondly, it was very interesting. I was looking at this, what do you call it? A survey conducted by Open Matters with Deloitte of the Standard & Poor 500 companies. I never in my wildest dream expected to see this number. Market value today. In the old days, CFO Malinga is here, and I think he'll agree with me. Pretty much your balance sheet gave you a picture of the market value broadly some years ago. Debatable. But largely, you could look at a balance sheet, and then the CFO would tell his CEO what the market value of the company is. Today, I was very surprised to read in that survey, as much as 83% of market value is created by intangibles. So we have a 500-year-old balance sheet, which the CFO's tool, maybe not Malinga's, which is completely outdated, which captures nothing of these 83% intangible. And that's the great tool that the CFO has now to go and talk to his CEO about market value and how well they're faring against market value, with absolutely no insight or very little insight to this 83% that constitutes market value. So you're starting with a terrific handicap. The customers have moved forward. What are these intangibles anyway? Mainly your customers, your people, customers and employees. And I heard Keith talk a lot about employees and how this is going to affect how companies look at employees. Customers, employees, intellectual property, obviously, but most importantly, social and business networks. And we'll talk about that in a minute when we talk about Apple. So it's about that kind of intangibles that creating market value. Now, in this extremely dynamic industry, to stay ahead, you have to innovate. We all know that. It's no big deal. But how are you going to innovate when you have so little view of this 83% intangible? That's my point. Starting with your customer. We'll come to employee later. Customer. What do we really know? Lakshman, you talk about customer centricity. Take Sri Lanka. And Jonathan, you are here. Sadly, I'm not a customer of your bank still. Hopefully, I will be soon. But my bank doesn't know me. It's a joke to say that today banks know their customers. I'm sure Jonathan will disagree, and I'm deliberately being provocative. We discussed this. So it's all in the game plan. But certainly, the banks that I deal with know so little about me. In fact, one bank, which was my first credit card I got from them, I was very proud to be their credit card owner. I hardly use them, and they have not contacted me at all. So we are starting off by not knowing anything or very little about our customers. Last 5 minutes? Okay. So, my God, time flies. So, right. So that's the key point I want to make. And to be distinctive, you have to do two things. One is you have to be distinctive vis-a-vis your competition. But second is to be distinctive in your offering. And today, with insights, we have the ideal market segmentation of one. So when we use the word distinctive, we are talking about how can I distinguish myself from competition, but how can I give a very distinctive offering to a very distinctive customer? So that's where I think companies today are not adopting these technologies as fast as they should. Digital is here. Digital has to be in the agendas of all CEOs right up front. Take the Angela Ahrendts of Burberry. The company was dying when she did a massive digital transformation. And she had a very interesting thing to say. I'll come to that in a minute. She transformed Burberry purely by embracing her. Guess who had Angela Ahrendts? Apple, right? Because that's where Apple is going. And we'll talk about that in the few minutes that I have. Okay, so because of interest of time, where is the problem? Is adoption of digital slow? I think the fault largely lies with the CEOs and CFOs. Because CEOs are leaving this to IT. They're saying game. And that places unnecessary burden on IT because they have got another set of challenges. CEOs are passing the buck. We don't understand this. This is technology. Whereas CFOs are not understanding enough about their intangible assets, their customers. They are not spending enough time, and they are fighting with their old balance sheets and their old outdated, antiquated tools to give CEOs an idea of where they stand. This is ridiculous. So this is where the problem begins. Pass the thing, and this brings to focus the question of the role of the CEO and the CFO in the digital transformation. And CFOs are called upon to play a multifaceted role, and they just don't have the data. The balance sheet they know, the P&L they know, a couple of other sheets they know, but they don't know the intangible assets and how this is coming together. So my point is the problem starts there, and that's where they need to address this issue. I'll take an example of this. And also, one important point I would like to leave for the panel and for you is this. There is no point using digital for incremental, guys. Don't waste your time. If you're going to do all these analytics and only sell the same old banking products and the same old shampoos in the same old way and thinking this is somehow going to make a transformation, forget it. That's not going to happen. It'll be a waste of time. It has got to be completely insane idea that you got to work on. And that's where I'll leave with the last example of Apple. What was Apple's great launch last month? The Apple Watch, right? And the iPhone 6, no big deal. Apple Watch, last minute, thank you. But the big deal with Apple is that they have completely moved into a new area which Jonathan should be very concerned about, and Rohan, since you represent the banks, Apple Pay. Apple Pay is the next game. They are going after the payments. So this is not a technology company. This is not even a design company. People think of Apple, their core competency is what? Design. It's not design. Design, yes, because it makes it such a pleasure to use those devices. But the game behind this is Apple Pay. Guess who was at the launch? Yes, from the fashion world, Vogue and all that. Yes, they were there. Who else was there at the launch? Bank executives. JP Morgan, Visa, MasterCard. They're at the Apple new launch. Why? Apple Pay. So they have lined up. You remember I spoke about these networks, social networks that bring real value, intangible. They have created a network of banks, and I got the numbers, 11 biggest US card issuers, representing 83% of the market, is in Apple's network now. Going to create a massive market value for them. Because they say network aggregators create 8x of revenue valuation. Whereas asset builders, the old balance sheet boys, will produce 2 times market value. So, and they also lined up retailers. Walgreens and McDonald's. I was shocked that Walgreens and McDonald's have 220,000 stores in the US. This is Apple's play. So, my last point is, use digital today. Don't park it under IT or under some business. Ring fence these people. Get smart people, get them working on real business challenges. CEOs, CFOs, get this in your agenda. Today we are doing, and I'll talk about it in Q&A, very interesting models to our customers in Sri Lanka today. We'll talk about that in Q&A. And last but not least, do not think of digital as incremental, you lose the game. That's mediocrity, it won't take you anywhere. Digital is for transformation and a whole business model transformation. And I look forward to the Q&A. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Peter. So a couple of key points I would like to just highlight from the Peter speech is the dilution of the entire concept called brand. And I think the intangibles coming into the P&L, that's going to be really, really interesting. Peter, we look forward to hearing a lot more. Thank you for that. And next is, if you haven't heard about Larry Ellison and Oracle, you probably haven't lived at all. Chris, joining last early morning today from Singapore office to join us. He's from Oracle. I'll give a brief introduction after this, but Chris, over to you.
Thank you, Rohan. Right, I spoke with Lakshman, late last week, right? And what he shared with me was, Chris, I want this session, to come from your heart, right? Forget that 10, 15 minutes, your corporate head, right? So I'm gonna try my very best to do so. And just touching on, Peter's comments, right? And definitely a hard act to follow, right? Agree 100% that digital has to be transformational, right? And also, it has to be embraced by the entire organization, right? Cross-functional, sales, marketing, CFOs, top-down, so all the way down to the call center agents, the person manning the branch counter, right? So it has to be transformational, right? And but there's one thing that I do not agree with Peter on is the comment about incremental improvements, right? So to a lot of us, right, the mere models, right, incremental improvements, has its value as well, right? So in the rest of my presentation today, while I'm going to touch upon the broad transformational impact, I'm also going to show examples of how organizations can embrace SMAC, or call it digital, right? To help us get to the larger goal of value creation, Right, so social mobile analytics cloud, right? So that's the title of our conference today, and this would be a good lead-in, right? So is it an end in itself or a means to an end, right? So my personal point of view is it's a means to an end, right? I mean, digital for its own sake, what is it going to get you, right? So for the rest of this presentation, I'm going to touch on, how digital could be used to impact the customer journey, right? And in this morning's session when Heather talked about the mega trends, right? So I'm going to boil it down a little bit to say, so how does these mega trends actually impact the way we live, right? So for sure, the customer journey today is a lot more complex, right? I mean, in the good old days, if there are marketers out here, what do? You come up with your product branding, you analyze your market, what your competitors offer, here are your differentiators, you put the message out to, via the traditional media channels, you own the communication. But it's not so simple today, right? I mean, as a consumer, more educated, more sophisticated, the buying journey is, a lot more complex today. You get your opinions from your friends, from social media, review sites. So as a brand, your control of the messaging, a lot of it is out of your hands, right? And, one key theme in, my presentation today is about cross-channel orchestration, right? So again, today, the buying process is not as straightforward as like, you read a product review, you compare a couple of options, and then you go out and buy it, right? You go back and forth, you may get your information online, and then you check with your friends, you go to the retail store, you speak to the retail assistant, and then you may walk out again. So how, as a brand, do you make sure that the final purchase decision lies in your favor, right? Right. So now I'm going to touch on some statistics here, right? I mean, we all know that from a impact perspective, right? 98% of consumers go through multiple channels in their buying process, like what I touched on earlier, right? So what does this mean to you, right? Are you able to make sure the orchestration is seamless? Or you may end up with, I'm sure, how many of you have actually had the personal experience of repeating your contact details, umpteen times, right? On the phone with a call center agent. Later on, even though you place your order online and you, show up at the retail store, the person has difficulties, picking up your orders, right? So that's, the challenge today. Right? And 52%, of people can't find what they want online, right? And, we all know today, right? I mean, it's second nature now. You want to find some information, whether you are booking a holiday, an air ticket, what do? You go online, right? And if your prospective customer can't find you online, what's it going to mean to you as a business? Then, following on from that, 57% of a purchasing decision, has more or less been taken even before the first contact has been made with you as a brand. Now, if your prospective customer is out there, talking, to your competition or doing research on comparison sites, or even they may be reading up, product specifications on your own website. Do you know that? Does your salespeople know, that a prospective customer of yours, who has an upcoming project 6 months, 12 months down the road, looking for information on your website? Do you know that? How do you take the proactive steps to make sure, you guide this process along? So at Oracle, right, what we have done is that, this thing called buyer intent or, customer journey, right? I mean, we can't say that we've created it, no, but what we've highlighted, right, is that, the customer journey here, basically, depicts the process of what I would say a typical customer, right? I'm sure, some of you here would challenge me to say, every journey is different and all that. Okay, we digress. But most of the time, people will go through the process of researching, comparing, selecting, the purchase itself, the usage, and then at the last stage, right? And this is where all of us would drive towards, right, or aspire to, is advocacy. Customers who become, brand advocates, right? Recommend your products and services, to their friends, family, and business associates. So, end of the day, the middle section of the slides here, right, is just, all the disparate interaction channels, right? Whether it's, the various digital channels, social, your own website, paid media, whatever, doesn't matter, right? The important thing is, as a brand, your customer demands and expects, the flexibility, right, to interact with you as they see fit. So, what does this mean, to you as an organization, right? And as what Peter highlighted, right? As companies or enterprises, we are here, to create value, right? And as a side effect of the value, for our shareholders, yes, there are financial returns. For the buyers of our products and services, they get value from that. So, end of the day, digital, in its own serves nothing, right? But how do you map that back, into business KPIs that can help you, take your company, to the next step of embracing digital, right? And Peter highlighted about, the disconnect between CEOs and CFOs talking the different languages and all that, right? But these three categories of KPIs I've highlighted here, tell me which CEO or CFO in the room here, do not care about customer acquisition that leads to increased revenue. I'm sure everybody cares about it, right? Operational efficiency, right? Everybody cares about it, right? Who doesn't want to drive costs down, right? I'm sure, the CFOs in the room, when I mention the word, driving costs down, you will perk up, right? And then retention. Yep, retention touches, both sides of the equation, right? You have loyal customers, you have increased revenue, right? And then everybody knows that, it costs more to acquire a new customer than to maintain an ongoing one that will continue doing business with you, for their lifetime, right? So, end of the day, these are just some business KPIs, right? And what I'm going to share with you, in the remaining few slides and time that I have, are examples that touch on, those, three broad categories of business benefits, right? So I'm going to start with, retention first, right? I beg your pardon, acquisition, right? So, as enterprises today, how many salespeople in the room? Can I have a show of hands? Gosh, I think, we are a minority here. I see a few scattered hands. I'm a salesperson, so is Peter, right? So what do we care about is, growing sales, right? And another approach of growing sales is to make sure customers who are with you stay with you, continuing buying from you and increasing their wallet share, right? So Zurich is a general insurance company, right? Selling fire and casualty insurance, right? And very typical of insurance organizations and how they sell is that they hire a field sales force. And they will organize marketing events where they will update both their field sales force and their prospective customers and current customers about their new products, services, and offerings, right? But end of the day, people walk in and then they walk out. Maybe at best they will receive a thank you email, but in the room of 100 people, how do you know which one is at that point in time when they are ready to buy, right? So, some of the digital technology available to you today, and organizations like Zurich is using it, to transform how they sell, right, is, in my earlier slide, I talked about the mapping of the customer journey. So the technology is available, for you today, to understand and track from the digital behavior, of your prospects and customers as they journey with you so that you could understand, this group of people, they are just fishing around. Nothing wrong with that, right? But subsequently, they'll be ready to buy, And they will give certain buying signals, right? They will go and download a white paper on your site, and in the case of Zurich, they will attend a product briefing. And these are insights that Zurich will accumulate and then make this information available to their field sales force so that the field salesperson can make an informed call as to when's the right time to approach the customer for either a renewal or an extension of the terms of the insurance plan, right? So here are just some of the business benefits.
Excuse me, sorry, 2 more minutes.
Got it. To some of the business benefits that they have realized, right? And one of which is improvement of their renewal rates by 10%. Right. Next, I'm going to talk about Best Pro Shop, right? Which I'm sure no one in this room has heard of them, right? I intentionally picked this up, right? Again, to show that this digital transformation is not the domain of large organizations only. It's not the domain of companies who can sign big checks to the likes of the Oracles and Microsoft and IBMs to transform their whole operations. No, right? A small retailer like Best Pro Shop that deals in fishing equipment and lifestyle, again, uses digital to engage better with their local residences that are that are near the retail outlets, so that customers near their main shop, right, will get information pertaining to fishing season in Maine, which is different from customers of theirs who are in New Mexico, who have different fishing seasons, right? So this is all about delivering targeted content, to your customers, so that it's not. The relationship is no longer random, right? Where someone walks in, walks out, and then in between the visits to the retail store, you have no idea, what they mean to you, right? And then, last but not least, I'm going to touch on a financial services reference, which is National Australia Bank, and they are all digital sister company, UBank. Again, they've adopted digital, right, to consolidate all their self-service and knowledge capabilities into a single platform. And what does that mean, right? This means it gives their customers, right, a single source of truth in terms of handling inquiries about how do I open a bank account, getting information about how do I do certain types of transfers, and the benefits to National Australia Bank, right, is that they reduce their inbound call center calls from 200,000 to 2,000, right? So these are all incremental benefits, right? And it's within the reach of all of us here in the room. So I'm just gonna wrap up, right? So I've got 6 takeaways, but in the interest of time, right, I just want to highlight one, right, which is basically all of us understand multi-channel today, right? It's a given, right? But I think the key takeaway, for when you leave this conference and go back to your jobs, is to think about how you can orchestrate more effectively across channels, right? So that you are able to deliver the optimum service experience, right? And we all know good service means good business. All right, it's a wrap. I overran, so I'll take my seat.
Thank you, Chris. Appreciate it. So I was looking at the slide and I saw the Oracle name there, but I didn't see any of them back. So I'm assuming that you should invoice the royalties. But it's time now actually to make a little bit of few moments for the sponsors who made this event possible. Are we gonna take some time? Shall we come back later? Come back later. Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Chris, for setting the context to start off. Now, for everyone who's here, kindly send in your requests for any kind of clarification or any questions you may have. Feel free to challenge any ideas. There's no right or wrong answer. I have a few questions myself, but before we get into that, I'd like to open from this, and then I will go across for an opening kind of statements from the panelists who didn't get the chance to speak. Irfan, would you like to start? Just before that, for the benefit of time, I'm not getting into the descriptions of introducing any of the panelists. Luckily, Lakshman has done a very nice introductory booklet. Kindly see all the introductions to all of our panelists are there. To you.
All right, good morning, everyone. So this is my view on the two presentations I've heard so far, and then the session earlier in the morning. So Peter, in the spirit of being contentious and spicing things up a little, I thought I'll have a little go at something you said. You said SMAC is digital, and I'd like to disagree. SMAC and digital are completely different, but they're also hand in glove. I think SMAC is the tip of the iceberg, and digital is what drives it. Let me elaborate. So basically, you said that digital drives innovation, and innovation creates value. And value is an important discussion in all our organizations, because that's why we're in business. If we don't create value, we don't create growth. If we don't create growth, we might as well be dead. So the point, I just want to draw an illustration to Kodak, which I think Udena spoke about earlier. Kodak was actually good with digital. They invented digital imaging, and they hold the patent, but they're still bankrupt today. There's nothing wrong. I mean, they had 4,000 patents in the digital sphere. They were an absolutely innovative company, but they went bankrupt, despite holding the patent. So the point is, it's not just good enough to innovate. It's good. Marketing is all about managing the perception of value. So if Kodak had used or had access to SMAC, or at least listened to the customer, had built empathy with the customer, or knew what else was happening out there. You know, there are camera phones emerging, people would love to click. I mean, there was a statistic of 800 million photographs a year. Where is it being shared? So why are people getting out of printing? Kodak would have thought about, okay, it's not just good enough to be digital and innovate. What is absolutely important is to build a consumer value proposition around understanding how that consumers need and how that consumer's world is evolving. So that's where I see the point of difference. I think digital is largely pervasive throughout the entire value chain of the organization. But SMAC is what brings that outside-in approach to the organization, helps the organization build empathy around what's happening out there, and then manage that perception of value, which is getting much more intricate than what it used to be. So that's my piece.
Just a quick clarification.
Peter, shall I come to you?
No, I'm not going to. I'm only going to. I'm not going to say. I use the word digital for social media analytics and cloud. I'm not instead of, because I'm averse to acronyms. So I use the word digital for those four. Right. So not digital in the context of Kodak. So I just want to make that
I think I'd like to highlight that during the meeting just before coming here, we all agreed that we are not going to use SMAC because first of all, it gives you that, reminds you of that cheap drinking experience you would have had some time back. And SMAC somewhat kind of, I think, narrows down the value proposition we are talking about. Malinga, over to you.
Yeah, so what should I use? So I'm not going to use SMAC, so I'll call these four technologies.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
And because we are on the topic of delivering distinctive value, I think with the emergence of these four trends, there are new ways of delivering these distinctive value propositions. So I have thought about three of those. One is redefining customer experiences as individualized experiences. Hotels, airlines have started doing this. Then the second one is redefining customer engagement as mobile engagement in context. In context meaning, where is the customer now and what is he trying to do? Increasingly, retailers are doing this. And then the third one is redefining customer base as a resource for co-creation. Coca-Cola is doing this for marketing and promotions. And also, the convergence of physical and digital worlds means that not only the online businesses like Amazons and Googles, also for businesses like hotels, hospitals, FMCG companies, retailers, this four technologies is very, very relevant. And I think, as Peter mentioned, the time is now to move forward. And there's a big, apart from the SMAC as the enabler, there's a big force behind this, which is called as the mobile mind shift, where more and more people are using mobile devices as a natural extension of their selves. And this is a determinist, definitive trend, and it's a massive trend. So the consumers are making that shift. It is for the companies to actually respond to that. It is the companies and the other stakeholders who are actually slow. Just to give a couple of examples of companies who are taking advantage of this. I was just getting ready for this session. Then I saw Commonwealth Bank of Australia and ICICI Bank in India. They love their customers to bank through Facebook. So that's the kind of trends we are seeing. Thanks.
Kani, you come from the big boy organization of Unilever, kind of complete ownership of Sri Lankan FMCG category, so to speak. Give us a little bit of insight from the FMCG and the supply chain part, because I believe you have the expertise around that.
Thank you, Lakshman, for inviting me for this futuristic topic, because you keep raising the bar always, right? But I will talk about SMAC rather than calling digital or anything like that. It's easier. I'm also averse to acronyms. But I need to provoke your thinking on how SMAC has really used globally to their own competitive advantage, and to some extent in Sri Lanka in some companies. Because still this technology has not been fully embraced by supply chain. So information is a key driver in supply chain, because without information and visibility, supply chain will be groping in the dark. So that is a very, very important enabler to drive the supply chain. So recent Gartner top 25 survey that was released recently, the top 5 are: number 1 is Apple, number 2 is McDonald's, number 3 is Amazon, number 4 is Unilever, my company, and former company, and P&G, arch rivals. So if you really look at the top 25, and especially in the top 5, and the key themes that you see in the recent Gartner's rating is that the companies who have really gone up the ranking have really got a deeper understanding, deeper and a contextual understanding on customer insights. Not only that, those companies have really used these consumer insight through leveraging digital technology, apart from the normal conventional way of managing supply chain. So if you really look at supply chain is seen as kind of a backbone of a company, but then that is my view. But we are still working behind the scene, and marketeers are at the forefront. But if you really look at that, if you don't harness the potential of this SMAC technology, and you will never be able to achieve the desired benefit. So in the next few minutes, when the others finish their point of view, I would like to provoke your thinking by giving examples globally, and also how we should adopt that, embrace that in Sri Lanka, and what are the challenges that we have will be spoken about.
Thank you, Gani. Jonathan, now I think we had this conversation. I think a lot of people are with me when I say that banking really hasn't evolved. I mean, it's really been like 100+ years behind the game. What would you think this entire digital or SMAC or whatever, how is that translating to your industry?
Good morning, everyone. I hope I can be heard. Thank you, Lakshman, for the invitation. I'm happy to be here, equally happy to respectfully disagree with Rohan, and also some of the comments that probably Peter alluded to earlier. I mean, we need to sort of take it into context. I mean, don't get me wrong. I am fully for digital, fully for SMAC. I mean, like Lakshman so correctly said, as the premier bank in the country, we need to provide leadership, but need to provide leadership meaningfully. It should make sense to all the stakeholders. So go back 3 decades, you didn't have MI to talk with. Your executives in banks and financial organizations didn't know what MI was useful. Peter was looking at balance sheets at the time. So invariably, if you look at the products and services sold at the time, they were only balance sheet products. You were not looking at anything else at the time. So then balance sheets evolved to P&L, and now we are talking about cash flows, and then we talk of the intangibles, which then get converted to cash flows. So with those cash flows come payments. So yes, payments is going to be an important space in the financial services industry. We are quite aware that the telcos, the supermarkets and all will play a significant role in that. But we are equally conscious that the banks will have a big part to play in that as well. Over the next few years, primarily the banks, you will see a lot of the telco, supermarkets and the others coming with their own payment services. More importantly, what you will see is the collaborative nature of the way in which we would work. That is the banks and the supermarkets and the telcos. You don't need to look at international experiences. Just look in Sri Lanka, how many partnerships have been built over the last 2 years between all the banks and the telcos. And I believe that's forward. Because it's not something that you could just let, because at the end of the day, we are actually now talking of money. We are talking of financial services. There is responsibility, there is compliance involved. It's not as if some new players from a new industry can just come and get into the space of banks or the financial services industry, because that culture has not been there. I mean, we have been regulated for decades and decades. So it's unlikely that regulators themselves, being sensible, are just going to let go and permit this to go on. So I see a lot of collaborations taking place, and I see a lot of partnerships, and that's, I believe, the way forward for all of us to move in this space. Want to add a little more, but I could do it at the next round.
Yeah, I think let's just hold that thought, Jonathan, for a moment. Are we ready with the sponsor messages? Because I think we need to respect the people who make this happen. Otherwise, I have a series of questions coming up. I think it gets really exciting when you all ask questions. And then, because not every day you get this kind of eminent panel here. Take a break for the sponsors.
Platinum sponsor. For unlimited happiness, Mobitel, we care. Gold sponsor. On what's important to you, AIA Insurance, the real life company.
One experience on every device for everything in your life.
Agency partner, Media Factory Group of Company. Silver sponsor.
Simple to purchase and simple to implement. Make real savings and simplify your business with Intuition.
BoardPack, the leader in iPad board meeting automation.
Print media partner.
Vijaya Newspapers, helping shape opinions.
Print partner.
Mobitel Business Solutions offers a spectrum of services to improve the efficiency and accuracy of your business operations. With tracking, business automation, messaging, customer contact, and advertising solutions for corporates and businesses, Mobitel Business Solutions is geared to accelerate your business performance.
Do you know where your fleet is? Are you convinced that your company vehicles are being productive? If you're tired of losing track of your company vehicles, M-Track is the answer.
Staff fuel allowances are a must for any company with field operatives. but the paperwork and procedures consume both time and money. With Mobitel One Fuel Card, managing staff fuel allowance is a breeze.
Are missed calls and opportunities eating into your bottom line? It's a waste to lose out on potential profits. No more missed opportunities with our 24-hour M-Call Center solution. Are you tired of carrying all your cards, chits, forms and receipts with you? Not to mention the hassle of replacing them when you lose them. The Mobitel iCard acts as your corporate ID, allowance card, access control card, and attendance monitoring card. With Mobitel iCard, all you need is one card.
Connecting you to a world of opportunities with a wide array of customized business solutions, Mobitel is ready to enable you to reach your maximum business potential. Contact our solution consultants now. Mobitel Business Solutions, accelerating your business.
There's a couple of questions from the audience. Let me just start with that. There's an interesting question about why I'm carrying 2 mobile devices, because my CIO doesn't allow me to use my own devices. It's time for you to upgrade your CIO. That's the answer to that question. Then there's a thing about Twitter. I'm fully supportive of penetration of Twitter. Follow me, #Rohan205. That's my 2 minutes of fame. Jonathan, coming back to you, there's some interesting questions people have asked about the banking industry, especially about how you're adopting social mobile analytics and all that. I think we discussed this a little bit more, especially starting from the legacy to new product development, etc. I'd love to hear your thoughts about that part of it, and then I'll come to the Marling about some other questions as well.
So whilst I said we were limited with the MI over time, we have progressed. And now I think what we all should recognize is this big data and all this information that we are talking of is just limited to 1 year and 9 months. 90% plus information what you have in the world's databases is just 1 year, 9 months. The rest of it is less than 10%. Goes on to show the importance, in a sense, of the importance of predictive analysis. Using that information, using short cycles, short pieces of information to predict the future. Now, in terms of using this information, if I just take the question that was raised, we banks, I'll answer in general, I believe most of us have started working on social media. We have used it initially to brand ourselves, to communicate, to chat, to get information about the customers. I think some of us are in the process of uploading our application so that customers, like Malinga said, could actually apply for their products and services directly. We will continue to use these channels. And we could see the analytic angle of it as well when we actually combine it with our own internal data of what our own systems tell about these customers. The focus might not be everybody's social media for the bank, so there might be a discriminated priority towards, let's say, the teens, towards the youth segment, products that are used by them, e-banking, mobile banking, the cards, teen cards, etc. Moving on, mobile banking, I think one of the most important channels, alternative channels for banks. A lot of new product development that you would see in the banking industry would be rolled out through mobile, particularly in the payment service area. Using the mobile as well as social media and our own internal systems, we will start developing a lot of new analytics. And the advantage here is you can have your own data layers. You have companies doing small pieces of outsourced work to give us meaningful sales information, leads, as well as risk information. in order to run our business more proactively rather than, waiting for customers to come in. I mean, in a sense, answering Peter in terms of we don't know our customers, true. Maybe if I have 3 million customers, I may not know all 3 million customers. But we tended to, like most organizations, most industries, focused on a 80-20, the usual Pareto. So we looked at our private banking clients who like to actually sit at our officers. We got to know them, we served them, we addressed their needs. We went into second, third tier. But now with this data being available, which was not some time back, we have the opportunity, not just us banks, but the other industries as well, have the opportunity of studying more the behavioral aspects of our customers in order to address a wider segment and provide more solutions. It would look as if we have even customized to that extent beyond the private banking and the next segment.
I'll come back to one of the points a bit later, but just to make sure that I get the maximum out of other panelists. Malik, there's an interesting thing, question where Hemas is a conglomerate and Sri Lanka is so many conglomerates. It's in ways fair to say that conglomerates have different generations and different time frames, different SBUs live in. I mean, how is this taken up by your top management and your different sectors you have in the FMCG and the hospitality sector? I mean, how is this adoption or the change impact and should impact a conglomerate like Hemas?
Right. Just to clarify the question, you're asking how these 4 technologies are being adopted within Hemas?
Yeah. I'm asking because you have different businesses at different levels.
Yeah. So let me give you an answer. Just tell me whether I'm hitting in the right direction. Now we've had decent growth in the past, and going forward, our growth ambitions are much higher. And Trihan is sitting here, who's the MD of JL Morrison's, and his ambitions are, I think, multifold. So in order to hit those very ambitious targets, we'll continue to do new investments, acquisitions perhaps, but the biggest item on the agenda is innovation. And within innovation, this is going to play a huge role. So I think the questions was how companies like Hemas, conglomerates like Hemas Holdings adopt this. But I think we've just passed the why stage. Now we sort of convinced that we've got to do this. And to answer how we're going to adopt this, I would say we have to develop a digital agenda which fits in with the strategies of all businesses. So if you look at the group, we have a wellness cluster, then we have a leisure cluster, we have a mobility cluster, then we have a company called Enable to enable our digital strategy. So
that could be a good thing or a really bad thing, depending on where it is. But let me ask you this. I mean, while that sounds really good on paper,
right?
I mean, what is really going on with, I mean, is your top management really bought into this? This is right, the textbook PR script you're telling me.
So I would say we've sort of covered a lot of the why stage, meaning, yes, there are a lot more ground to cover, but we have achieved a lot as well. And I would say the battle is generally lost internally, not in the market. So it's very, very difficult to convince the other stakeholders to change. So people have to change, and that's taking hold.
Thank you, Malika. Coming back to Irfan. Irfan, so I think you have seen a lot. You have been at a telco, you were in a leading e-commerce thing with making lingerie. So I think one of the things I wanted to ask from you is that how do you see this transition taking place? And I think you wanted to add a few pointers about some of the previous points as well. Would you like to add something to that?
Yeah, I'll try.
So my question is primarily, there was an era before, talking about social, mobile analytics, and cloud. I mean, what has really changed as per what your understanding? Because you were specifically in the digital era and innovation era, innovation space in the current company. What has changed for you, and what do you think is the next going to be look like? Future is going to look like?
Okay, thanks, Juan. So basically, I see change to broad platforms. Firstly, I mean, whether it's marketing or whether it's innovation, it has a lot to do with the consumer and the market. And In that sense, I think the biggest opportunity we are sitting on right now, globally, and even in Sri Lanka, never before have we had 4 generations in one market. We have baby boomers, Gen X, Gen Y, and millennials in one market. I mean, the previous session kind of focused more on millennials, and I don't think that's entirely right. I think that's the future. But if you take the Sri Lankan context, we're all Sri Lankan companies, we need to look at our own local markets. We're going to have an aging population. So how are we going to tackle the the aging population is, me, right, in 10 years, and I'm Gen Y. So what are we going to do with Gen X and Gen Y? So to answer your question, I see the change basically happening in a very simple concept, which is SMAC is digital, but you've got to be able to latch it down to a physical aspect of your product or your service or your organization. Angela turned, but she didn't do it completely with digital or completely with social. She, I think I spoke about this at a previous forum, this concept called phygital, which is she took digital and emphasized her physical assets really well. She rationalized her store footprint. She gave open access to fashion shows, which used to be the forum of exclusive earlier. She completely changed the brand experience. So the opportunity for us right now in New York is particularly in the Sri Lankan context. And I want to talk about the Sri Lankan context because all of you guys here are going to need to start practicing it today in your companies. Think about the fact that you today have a massive opportunity. You are sitting across 4 generations. And how are you going to tackle these 4 markets using SMAC? And it can be done. It's just that your approach and what you're going to do is going to change. And how are you going to marry that with the physical assets of your organization? The second area that I'm seeing change in is, particularly now I work for a manufacturing organization. I think the session next week, we talk about it as well. There is, the point of consumer need and the point of manufacture is getting closer and closer. That the gap is reducing. So in terms of in being able to map that, how do you constantly create value? And that's the conversation here. How do you stay relevant in the market is a challenge that we have to answer using SMAC. And SMAC helps you do that. I'll just give you an example. Most of us fly around. So KLM does this interesting thing. They have a social platform that you log into and you become a member of. Okay. The program is called Meet and Greet. Next time you book a flight on KLM, you can select the person you'd like to sit next to because he's also on that social net. It's a simple idea, brilliantly executed using SMAC. So next time I go, I won't have to sit next to a hairy, overweight, sleazy guy who tends to fall asleep on my shoulder. I could probably pick a VS model and sit next to her. But that's at the end of the day, since our session is about, I want to bring it back to creating consumer proposition, right? So your proposition is what makes you relevant in the market. And you need to marry that proposition to the front end and the back end of your business. And that can easily be done if you start experimenting at least with SMAC.
And can I just touch on one point, right? Because he raised a very good point about the opportunity for us in this room here, right? And one of the opportunities I want to highlight that make things different than, let's say, 15 years ago, right? Is that the barrier to entry from a technology perspective because of cloud is very low, right? So even I sit here as Oracle, some of the customer examples that I put out here, right? Barrier to entry cost perspective is very low, right? So the KLM and all that, some of these, more innovative value propositions, you can get up and running for very low cost, right? If you want to find out how much, come and look for me outside. But no, it's not something that you need to go write a long business case and sign a big check and do months of approvals and all that to get it up and running. So I've seen customers who are able to launch initiatives, on the fly.
So I want to come back to Peter. You created a bit of a string of SMSs about Apple Pay, people saying you still need a bank, what's the difference between Apple Pay and Google Wallet? Simple, Google Wallet is better. And then, but the actual question they're asking, I mean, let me ask you two questions which I received. One is, while corporates move at a glacial pace with excuses, as we see happen on this very stage, the youth are impatient and will find alternate ways to get things done faster as they desire. Also known as missing out opportunities and business. So we'd like to hear your thoughts about that. The fact that organizations are moving really fast, but then the youth and the next generation of customers for any organization moving at a very different pace. And is there a mismatch? How do corporates match that? That's the first part. Shall I ask you the second question later? After you answer, or shall I give you? There's the other one is, when delivering a personalized experience to a low net worth individuals, as well as the high net worth individuals, wouldn't it reduce the exclusivity of the service? I think that's a more of a Jonathan question. So we'll come back to that. But Peter, if you can take the first question.
Jonathan, because I'd like Jonathan and the others to speak a little more. Very quickly, on the first question, which is organizations are moving fast, but the youth are moving faster. Is that correct? Yeah, I don't think organizations are moving fast. Global organizations may be moving fast, a handful, but Sri Lankan organizations are not moving fast. They are moving dead slow. So, and the reason is this. The reason is, and this is a dilemma that all companies face, and Malinga, you will have this challenge. We will have this challenge because I'm part of AMAS, is that people are very comfortable with what they define as their core competencies. This is the problem. CFOs will try to put money into the core competencies, and that is where things will fall apart. Because here is what Nike did from apparels. They went completely to something else, do shoes. But they moved into the digital revolution, so to speak. And I don't want to go into the details of that. You all can read it up. But here is what Mark Palmer said, and this is very interesting, the word he used, and this is so true of Sri Lankan companies. He says business models are not meant to be static. Then he goes on to say, one of my fears is being this slow, constipated, hell of a bloody word to use to describe a company. Constipated, bureaucratic company that's happy with its success. And this, Jonathan, I'm sad to say, will be one of the downfalls of the banking industry. They are one of the most comfortable because they have a big spread than any other industry banking that I know of. So I'm not alluding to Jonathan. I've had a few chats and he's a visionary. And hopefully he will change the banking industry, and I'm sure he will because he's talking. And I'll tell you why. I'll quickly finish this. I'm sorry. Because I was very interested to find out from a gentleman who spoke at our leadership conference at AMAS. Shiv Kumar, isn't it? Shiv Kumar. He's the CEO of Pepsi. Now he said about strategic competitive advantage. That's a myth, folks, because we only have what is called transient advantage, and I'll tell you why. Because he said airline industries have a competitive advantage of 20 years because you can't make that kind of stuff overnight. But I was amazed to find that the industry that has the least competitive advantage is financial services industry. He says a product can be replicated in 12 minutes. Beat that. So banks today do not see that coming, or very few do, because they're comfortable doing their successful business because they're protected by all kinds of things, you know. So this is why organizations can't move, Rohan. One, comfortable with their success, constipated, slow and constipated, terrible. I'll leave it with that.
I'm horrified as we speak, Peter. Jonathan, I'll give you the moment to answer because I know you're waiting, you're itching. But I want to come to Gaini. Gaini, I think we haven't heard enough about supply chain. I think you had a very nice, interesting couple of points about the digital, but I mean, I saw the previous presentation about Zara. I mean, Zara has been, we heard this 12 years ago about Zara, what they're doing to MNS and etc. I mean, that is before all of these good things in life happen. So then we heard about Walmart, digital, etc. So, I mean, what does that mean for customer centricity? To have all of this now and to be able to actually make a supply chain for a customer as and when the requirement comes. Can you elaborate and discuss a little bit more about that?
Okay. So what's the primary role of supply chain? You know, you need to fulfill the customer demand. So in that sense, supply chain starts with the customer. The starting point is that. But when you really look at the supply chains, this customer demand is always very often, if this demand and supply is equal, then we can fully, perfectly, always meet the customer demand. But in real life, we all know as supply chain people, especially in my profession, and this doesn't happen like that. But if you can really sense the demand, you know, and from the market, if you can, rather than, you know, our planning horizons are quite long, and when we plan, and then when we really start supplying the demand, various disruptions happen, and the demand itself will change closer to the time horizon. So then we have huge out of stock situations. And if you really look at the retail industry, Sri Lanka, unfortunately, I tend to agree with you, Peter, and we really still live in a very, sort of closed environment where we don't want to share information, and especially the EPOS data, electronic point of sale data, because we think it is proprietary to us, and by keeping it with us, we have some huge advantage. But most companies fail to realize that when you share the information in a seamless manner with your supplier, you can derive so much value to your customer. Just for example, if you really look at, the Grocery Manufacturers Association, US have really done a research, and they found out if you actually reduce your on-shelf availability by 3 percentage points, you can increase the turnover by 1 percentage point. Just imagine, it's actually a two-way process. It is not only the supplier who's going to benefit, it's the retailer also, because if the product is not there on the shelf when the customer goes to the shop, they will go to another competitor, and you're going to lose as well, not only the supplier. So there are, if you really look at that aspect, and by sharing information, using whatever the technology that we have, you're going to benefit. I mean, global giants like Walmart, and we all know they are much bigger and $400 billion turnover. And being such a big company, they are sharing their data within 15 minutes of the transaction happening. It's near real-time data sharing with all their stakeholders across the supply chain. And that system is called retail chain. And that system is able to predict even the weather forecast. So that way you know, okay, this is going to happen, therefore I'm going to reroute my shipments, or maybe I can advance my shipments, and I can do that. And that way you can really predict what's going to happen. And that's the kind of things that are happening globally. And unfortunately, I tend to agree with you, Peter, and we still live in a very dark age, and we really don't want to. But some companies are very progressive, they're doing it. But if we can do that, you will see the power of supply chain, and we can shrink the supply chain. Like Irfan said, we can actually do things much faster, and that is what all our aim is.
Thank you, Gaini. We are short of time. I would have loved to have at least another 10 more, but I have a very important question for Chris. Chris, there's a question raised. What are your thoughts on an omni-channel customer experience, and how is that impacting this technology? Would you care to elaborate that? That's what only thing they have asked. What are your thoughts on an omni-channel customer experience?
Okay. Actually, same as the subject of today's conference, SMAC, right? So, cross-channel, omni-channel, I would say these are terms which, our colleagues in marketing come up with, right? But basically, my perspective is this, right? Basically, it's the ability, to allow, you as a brand, right, and your customers to interact in any form or means that your customer chooses, right? So it's not you driving, the agenda. It's the customer, right? So that's one aspect, right? That customer has to say. The second aspect is, and I've mentioned it, a few times, in my presentation, right? Understanding intent, understanding context. And you mentioned customer journeys as well, right? And I heard the term outside in mentioned a few times amongst the panelists here, right? So these are all the new thinking and terms that all of us have to get familiar with. And these are the little bits that make things different today versus, let's say, 15 years ago when the term multi-channel was coined, right? So if the question is, how is that different from 15 years ago? What makes omni-channel different? What makes cross-channel different? These are the 2-3 dimensions, right? Understanding intent, understanding context, bringing that across the entire journey. I've heard the term market of one, but at the same time, understanding the community of customers and prospects, along the lines of, what particularly they are interested in, right? So, again, I've heard the terms of the various segments, right? Millennials, Gen Ys, and then you boil it down even narrower, right? Like in the example that I gave, right? Fishermen on the East Coast of the US and fishermen, on the West Coast, they are interested in different things, right? So again, that context, geography, where that person is from, their interests and all that. So these are all the things that adds up to make, omni-channel different. Now, technology-wise, does that form a challenge to deliver that experience? Answer is, it's a non-trivial technology challenge, right? So I'm not going to sit up here on stage and say, click of the finger, you can get omni-channel. But it's a journey that all of us have to work together. IT, finance, CEO approve the checks and all that.
Thank you, Chris. So since we are almost out of time, may I ask every panelist, starting from Peter, sorry? Yeah, just a few sentences, closing remarks. Jonathan may take a little bit of time because I know he had few things to answer, and then we'll wind up the panel discussion today for this topic.
Quickly, again, in the spirit of being contentious, Irfan, this whole idea of baby boomers, millennials, all that I think is gone, because it is a market of one. No millennial would like to be told you are a millennial. He'll say, what? And, he will throw back at you. So it is precisely this mobile and social and cloud that allows you, Jonathan, to look at all of your customers today as important today. This technology allows you to go beyond that old thing that you do. And I understand that where you have to look at prioritizing. No, not anymore. You can start looking at millions of customers as a market of one. And my point is, adopt this very, very quickly in a very transformational way. Because today, if you take organizations like ISIS, you'll have heard of ISIS, that's creating a huge change in the landscape in Arabic countries. Unknown, just a few months ago, everybody knew Al-Qaeda and all of that. ISIS was unknown. Today, they have taken large amounts of territory in Iraq and Syria. Now, they use social, mobile, analytics, and cloud. So they are ahead of the game. And this is being talked about a lot. So I'm saying while these organizations are using technologies that's available today, my point to everybody in this audience is, and particularly the CEOs and the CFOs, get this as your mainline agenda. Do not leave it for someone else. That's my point.
We'll, quickly, because I'm getting bombarded with SMSs from Lakshman saying, stop, 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 stop.
So I will reiterate my message earlier, right? Because the barrier to entry is low, right? Take the chance, right? I mean, try, and if you need to fail quickly, because, your cost, your downside is kept. Because the business model has changed. We were discussing it outside when we were prepping for this, right? I mean, and go speak to my colleagues from Microsoft, IBM, and all that, right? From a technology perspective, we are helping the businesses, right, by capping your downside, right? Because from a cost perspective, barrier to entry is low. So go out, think about it, and try.
Obviously, Pete is not a fan of the banking industry. He shouldn't forget that I still write the big checks at HNB. But I think I like the contradiction between Peter and Chris at the beginning. And I think that was quite appropriate for all of us to understand. Peter wanting the big digital transformation, and you had Chris coming in as an implementer from Oracle saying there is an incremental aspect to it. And I tend to agree with both. strategically, I think I don't need to be, preached. I'm already converted that this is the journey that we need to take. But I disagree that it's something that, I would do with the teens and the 70-year-old gent at the same time. I mean, it's not about discrimination. We run operating cost models as well. So it's not as if you can just overnight transform everything into digital and run it there. We still have, you take any survey across any organization in Sri Lanka, primarily even go international, they'll still say that they would love to come to your bank and do transactions with you. They still want to interact with you. And I tend to visit lots of customers and I get a whole load of information that maybe most others don't get because of the level of detail that we go into. So you should not underestimate the value of customer contact. Yes, I understand mobile is a new way of being in touch. Internet is a new way of being in touch. But we spoke of omni-channels now, and still in our industry, our brick and mortar plays a fairly significant role. But I do recognize, let's say in inclusion banking, using mobile, going into the rural, I picked up some questions. How does it help in inclusion banking? Big time. You can leverage mobile banking in a big way to go into the remote areas to do lots of good banking. So on behalf of all the bankers here, what I want to reassure you in summary is a lot of work is happening on the internet banking front, on the mobile banking front, working on a collaborative basis using our ATMs, electronic funds transfer, POS machines, and all that in order to provide customers better and better services and a product range day by day and providing it through alternative channels.
Thank you, Jonathan. I apologize, but time is not on our side.
I'll be quick. Professor Martin Christopher once said that future competition is not going to be between products, but between supply chain. Supply chain professionals is that we need to be solution provider. Move away from providing a product or a service. Be a solution provider. That way you can create more value using these technologies.
Thank you, Gani.
Yeah, I think there has to be a sense of urgency in leading this transformation, and I would like CEOs, CFOs have to transform their mindsets and also understand how digital strategies drive cash flows. Then it's easier for them to, because there will be investments, particularly in the back end, not on the mobile devices. So it's important to first change the mindset and then also acquire the capability to understand this digital strategy.
Thank you, Mahalinga.
So just Max, I think it's important to just start and not get caught up with the intricacies of the technology and the concepts, and not to overthink it. I mean, just like Peter rightfully said, you overthink it, you're going to end up being constipated. Consumer proposition is very simple. You just need to figure out what the consumer is thinking, feeling, and doing. And that's what we need to build a powerful proposition. And we live in an age now where we are far more equipped to do it than we were 5 years ago. So make the start. You really can tune into what they're thinking, feeling, and doing.
So I think from my side, 2 thanks. Lakshman, thank you. Thank you, panelists. 2 apologies. Sorry if I missed some of your questions. I couldn't take all of them because we only had about 40 minutes. And sorry from the next panel because we overshot our time by 7 minutes. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Before I thank the panel, just 2 messages. We have a tradition in lieu of honorarium to our speakers who donate their time. We make a contribution to Candleaid Sri Lanka. Unfortunately, Captain Elmo Javadana, founder, is out of the country, and our usual, person who accepts the donation from us, Rajitha Fernando, he's also out of the country. There's a message from Captain Elmo, which we will circularly email to everyone. And about mobile broadband, you can access mobile brand courtesy Mobitel, Sri Lanka's best mobile network, no doubt. Password is Mobitel123. That's about it. So the gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, the message is very clear. Either be customer-centric, use Mac, and innovate, or you will have death by constipation. So, so the choice is yours. Thank you so much, Peter. Peter's usual role is, he usually, opens our, conferences as the session chair. So today a different role, Peter. Thank you so much. And Chris, you must be recovering from your last night flight. Thanks so much for making a wonderful presentation. And Jonathan, yes, we are sure that you will revolutionize, banking industry. #1 bank in Sri Lanka. Gani, thank you so much. I see JK Marketing CIO here. I believe, Nalaka, you heard what she said about POS data. Thank you so much, Malinga, sharing our thought. Irfan, wonderful. Nadira, you better check what is in his, what are the applications in his mobile phone. Thanks, Irfan. Thank you so much, Rohan. Thank you. We are moving on to the last session before lunch. May I invite speakers of the third session on stage?